The princess hid her babies among strangers as the empire crumbled. The stars themselves seemed to shiver in fear, as if the galaxy was watching the final hours of an empire that had ruled for centuries. In the heart of the city, the royal palace rose like a lonely monument, its towers reaching for a sky now choked with ash. Princess Selara stood on a balcony, staring at the destruction below, her hands clenched around the railing. She could hear the distant cries of those fleeing, and the thunder of weapons destroying everything her people had built. Her advisors were running in and out of the council room, shouting orders, but their faces were pale, their confidence gone. The Empire's fleets had been destroyed, its armies crushed, and the enemies were advancing faster than anyone had imagined. Selara's heart sank with every report. She had trained her whole life to rule, to defend her people, to carry the legacy of generations, but all of it seemed like ashes in her hands. The most precious of all her duties, however, was not to the empire itself, but to her children. In a hidden chamber beneath the palace, 3 small infants slept, unaware of the chaos surrounding them. Each child was wrapped in soft blankets, their tiny hands clenching and unclenching as they dreamt. Selara had spent weeks preparing this hiding place, reinforcing it with locks, alarms, and secret passageways. She had whispered to them in soft tones before leaving them that they were the hope of the empire, the living memory of all that had come before. But even as she whispered, she knew that staying in the palace was impossible. The invaders would not stop until they had destroyed every trace of her bloodline. If they found the children, they would be lost, and with them, the last hope of the human empire. Selara's mind raced. She needed a plan that could protect them, not just for days, but for years. She needed strangers, ordinary humans who could keep them safe without realizing their true value. She left the palace through a hidden corridor, moving silently as explosions shook the foundations. Her cloak was dark, blending with the shadows. She stepped into the streets, now a river of chaos, filled with refugees, soldiers, and scavengers. Smoke stung her eyes, and the cries of the wounded echoed in her ears. She passed families running with what little they could carry, merchants dragging carts of goods, and children holding onto their parents' hands, their faces pale with fear. Among them, she sought people who could become guardians for her children, people whose courage and kindness were hidden beneath ordinary appearances. The first child she entrusted to a man named Darren, a mechanic who repaired ships in the lower districts. Darren's hands were rough, his face streaked with oil and dirt, but his eyes held a quiet strength. Selara approached him as he worked on a broken hovercraft, pretending to be just another refugee seeking shelter. She observed him for hours, watching how he treated others, how he refused to take advantage of the weak, how he risked his own safety to save a child trapped under debris. She knew he would care for her child as if he were his own. When she finally handed over her son, she whispered the truth into Darren's ear, careful that no one else could hear. She pressed a small crystal pendant into the baby's hand. It was tiny, shimmering with encoded information, secrets of the empire that might be needed one day. Darren's eyes widened in surprise, but he nodded solemnly, understanding that the life he held in his arms was far more important than anything he had ever imagined. Next, she found Lyra, a scholar who lived among the libraries of the ruined city. Lyra's hair was streaked with gray, and her hands were covered with ink stains, but her mind was sharp, and her heart was full of compassion. Selara watched her help children who had lost their parents, teach them words, numbers, and history so they would not be forgotten. Lyra agreed without hesitation to protect her second child, cradling the infant as if it were a fragile treasure. Selara left another pendant with the child, explaining its significance in quiet, hurried words. Lyra promised she would keep the secret, protect the child, and teach them the wisdom of the past. The third child was entrusted to Kale, a former soldier turned protector of the city's weak. Kale was broad-shouldered and silent, his movements careful and precise. He had no family left, only a sense of duty that guided him. Solara approached him in a crowded marketplace, disguised as a refugee. She observed him as he defended a small group of children from a gang of raiders, never hesitating, never faltering. She knew then that he would protect her third child with the same determination, even at the cost of his own life. Another pendant passed into tiny hands, and Kale accepted the responsibility without question, his stern eyes softening as he cradled the infant. With her children hidden among strangers, Solara felt a weight lift from her shoulders, but a new burden replaced it, the knowledge that she could not stay close to them. The city was too dangerous, and if she remained, she would only draw attention to the ones she sought to protect. She moved through the ruined streets, blending with the crowd, careful not to look back. Every corner held danger, every shadow could conceal an enemy. Her heart ached with every step, but she reminded herself that survival was the only victory she could secure for now. As she fled the capital, she remembered the last words of her father, the late emperor. "Strength is not just in armies or fleets, Solara. It is in the people who believe in what we protect. Never forget that." Those words resonated now more than ever. Her children, hidden among ordinary humans, were safe because of the goodness and courage that existed in the hearts of others. Humanity itself was stronger than any empire, stronger than any weapon. She reached a distant alley where a small ship waited, its engines hidden beneath debris. A trusted aide, disguised as a refugee, guided her aboard. The ship lifted into the sky, navigating through the flames and smoke that enveloped the city. Below her, she could see the empire she had known collapsing, buildings falling, fleets burning, and people running for their lives. Yet even in the chaos, there were moments of bravery, humans helping each other, shielding the weak, carrying those who could not walk. Solara's heart swelled with hope amidst the sorrow. The journey took her far from the capital, beyond the borders of her known world. On each planet she visited, she observed humanity's strength, the resilience, the ingenuity, the will to survive. Every step she took reinforced her belief that ordinary humans, the strangers who now carried her children, were capable of extraordinary acts. They were the true defenders of the legacy she sought to preserve. As night fell on the fourth day of her journey, Solara found a quiet place to rest. She gazed at the stars, each one a distant beacon of light in the dark void. She thought of her children, hidden in the care of strangers, and whispered a silent prayer that they would grow strong, wise, and courageous. She knew that the empire's fall was not the end. It was the beginning of a new story, one written by the courage of humans, not by the crowns they wore. The princess closed her eyes, letting exhaustion take her for a few hours. Dreams of her children's laughter mingled with the visions of burning cities and fallen fleets. Yet, even in her sleep, hope remained. She knew that one day, when the time was right, her children would rise, not just as heirs of an empire, but as symbols of humanity's enduring strength. The galaxy was changing, the empire crumbling, and the future uncertain. But within the hearts of ordinary humans, guided unknowingly by her children, a spark had been lit, a spark that could grow into a flame capable of lighting the darkness. Princess Solara smiled softly as she drifted into sleep, knowing that she had done everything she could to protect the ones who mattered most. And somewhere, far across the stars, the three infants slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos around them, safe in the hands of strangers who would one day teach them the true meaning of courage, hope, and humanity. Years passed since Princess Solara had hidden her children among strangers. The galaxy had changed. The empire, once powerful and unshakable, was now a shadow of its former self, fractured into territories controlled by opportunistic warlords and scavengers. The people were wary, cautious, but a quiet strength had begun to emerge among them, humans learning to survive and thrive even without the guidance of rulers. The first child, Kale, had grown under the care of Darren, the mechanic. The boy had inherited a clever mind and a strong sense of responsibility. He had learned to repair engines, fix broken ships, and improvise solutions from scraps of metal and circuits. Darren had taught him the importance of patience and precision, and Kale had absorbed every lesson, becoming a young man capable of understanding complex machinery and solving problems others could not. Kale's hair had grown long and dark, and his eyes, always observant, reflected both intelligence and curiosity. Though he did not know his true lineage, a sense of duty to protect others had grown within him, shaped by the man who raised him like a father. In a distant city of books and learning, Leora, the second child, had been raised by Lyra, the scholar. Leora's world was filled with books, maps, and stories of old civilizations. Lyra had taught her to read not just words, but the meaning behind them, to think critically and observe carefully. Leora had become a young woman of sharp intellect, with a curiosity that knew no bounds. She spent her days studying, questioning, and dreaming of faraway worlds. Though she did not know that she was a princess, she felt a natural inclination to lead and protect knowledge, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not repeat themselves. Far from both cities in the rugged wastelands, Soren, the third child, had grown under Kale's guidance, the soldier who had become his guardian. Soren had learned how to survive in harsh conditions, how to defend himself and others, and how to think strategically in times of danger. The man who raised him taught him that strength was not just in fighting, but in protecting, in making sacrifices for the weak and the innocent. Soren's body had become strong, his movements swift and precise, yet his heart remained kind and compassionate. He did not know that he was royal, but he carried a natural instinct for leadership and bravery that had been nurtured through survival. Though separated by worlds and circumstances, all three children shared something invisible yet undeniable: resilience, courage, and the silent guidance of Princess Selara. She watched them from afar, sending discreet messages and observing their growth through trusted allies. She could not approach them openly. The invaders, remnants, and the warlords would still recognize her. But she found comfort in knowing that each child had grown strong in their own way, prepared for a future that none could yet foresee. Meanwhile, ordinary humans across the galaxy began to rise, driven not by kings or queens, but by their own sense of right and wrong. Communities formed, sharing resources, skills, and knowledge. They rebuilt what was broken, defended the weak, and resisted the tyranny of those who sought to exploit chaos. These people, ordinary by the world's standards, became extraordinary through their actions. Selara knew that this was the true power of humanity, the ability to rise when all seemed lost, to create hope even in the darkest moments. Kale's city faced a growing threat from raiders who sought to control the remaining starports and trade routes. One day, while repairing a derelict freighter, Kale noticed unusual movements near the docks. Ships with black markings moved in formation, clearly organized and armed. His instincts, honed by Darren's teachings, told him that danger was approaching. Kale alerted Darren and the community leaders, organizing a defense. He used his knowledge of machinery to set traps, rig explosives, and modify ships to be more agile and effective. When the raiders arrived, Kale led a small team of defenders, using clever tactics that allowed them to disable the attackers' ships without losing a single civilian. The people who had once been ordinary now recognized Kale's leadership, unaware that their young protector carried royal blood in his veins. In Leora's city, news of unrest reached the scholars and teachers. Warlords had begun to control trade routes, demanding knowledge as tribute and punishing those who refused. Leora realized that her studies alone would not protect the city. Guided by Lyra's lessons, she began to teach the children and young adults critical thinking, strategy, and observation. They learned to notice patterns, predict actions, and communicate secretly. Leora became a quiet leader, respected for her intelligence and fairness. Her influence inspired the community to work together, sharing information and developing strategies to protect themselves. In time, the city's defenses grew not from weapons, but from knowledge, cleverness, and trust. Sauron, in the wastelands, faced a different challenge. Raiders and bandits preyed on travelers, and danger was constant. Sauron had trained tirelessly, learning to anticipate attacks, protect his group, and navigate treacherous terrain. One evening, as the group rested near a canyon, a band of raiders approached, weapons drawn. Sauron acted without hesitation, positioning the defenseless at safe spots while using traps and clever maneuvers to confuse the attackers. By the end of the night, not a single member of his group was harmed, and the raiders fled, stunned by the efficiency and courage of someone they had underestimated. Sauron's reputation as a protector grew quietly, a testament to human resilience and determination. Despite the dangers, the three children grew with courage, intelligence, and compassion. Each, in their own way, became a symbol of hope for those around them. Kale represented ingenuity and resourcefulness, Leora the power of knowledge and planning, and Sauron the strength of protection and bravery. Together, even though separated, they embodied the qualities that Selara had hoped would survive beyond the Empire, humanity's enduring spirit. Princess Selara continued her observations from afar. She sent encoded messages through allies, offering guidance without revealing her presence. She encouraged Kale to trust his instincts, Leora to question assumptions, and Sauron to value protection over aggression. Though she could not embrace them or speak openly, she felt pride in the paths they had chosen. They were becoming more than her children. They were becoming leaders in a galaxy that had forgotten leadership, symbols of hope rising from ordinary people. One day, a message reached Selara that gave her a spark of cautious hope. Raiders and warlords, who had once ruled through fear, were beginning to retreat in areas where communities had organized and resisted. People who had been ordinary citizens were now defending themselves, using strategy, teamwork, and clever tactics to reclaim what had been taken. Humanity was learning to survive, to resist, and to thrive without rulers, yet guided by the moral compass Selara had instilled through her children. The princess realized that this was the beginning of a new order, one built not on fear, but on courage, intelligence, and unity. Kale, Leora, and Sauron each began to feel something they could not explain, a connection, a sense of destiny. Though unaware of their shared bloodline, they were drawn toward the idea of protecting humanity, of creating a future where the weak could survive, where knowledge was valued, and where bravery was honored. They began to understand that the world could be changed, not through the power of crowns or fleets, but through ordinary humans acting with extraordinary courage. Selara knew the moment was coming when her children would need to come together, though she did not yet know how. The galaxy was vast, and dangers were everywhere, but humanity's strength was growing in ways that the Empire could never have anticipated. Through the eyes of her children and the people they protected, she saw the proof. Humans were capable of greatness, even without kings, queens, or empires. They were capable of writing their own destiny. The princess rested on a distant world, gazing at the stars. She thought of the children she had hidden so many years ago, the strangers who had raised them, and the ordinary humans who were quietly shaping the future. A smile touched her lips. The empire might be gone, but its true legacy, humanity itself, was still alive. It was stronger than she had ever imagined, and her children were at the heart of it. In hidden cities, dusty wastelands, and quiet towns, humans continued to rise, defend, and innovate. They repaired ships, learned new skills, shared knowledge, and protected one another. Each act, no matter how small, was a seed of hope, a spark that could ignite a galaxy-wide change. And somewhere in the background, unseen yet watching, Solara guided the hands of fate with care, ensuring that the next chapter of human history would be written by those who were ready, willing, and brave enough to do so. The future was uncertain, full of danger and mystery, but for the first time since the fall of the Empire, it felt possible. Kale, Leora, and Sauron had grown into humans of remarkable ability, not because of their royal blood, but because of the strength of the people who had raised them. Humanity, in its ordinary brilliance, had survived the fall of an empire and was preparing to rise again. The spark of resistance, of courage, and of hope had been lit, and no empire, no matter how mighty, could ever extinguish it. Princess Solara closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel a rare peace. The galaxy was vast, the empire in ruins, yet life continued. Her children were safe, strong, and surrounded by humans whose hearts were unbreakable. And in that knowledge, she found the greatest truth of all. Humanity itself, in its ordinary, persistent brilliance, was stronger than any crown, any throne, or any empire. Years had passed since Kale, Leora, and Sauron had hidden from the remnants of the fallen empire. Each had grown into remarkable young adults, strong, intelligent, and capable, but still unaware of their true heritage. The galaxy around them was a patchwork of settlements, rogue factions, and scattered warlords. Yet the ordinary humans who had survived the Empire's collapse had begun to build a fragile but resilient order. In these communities, the children of the princess, unknowingly, were beginning to shine. Kale, now a young man, had taken on the role of a leader in his city of mechanics and traders. His ingenuity had turned the city into a hub for repairing ships and building new technologies from scraps. The docks were filled with vessels of every kind, from small freighters to sleek starcraft rebuilt for speed and survival. Kale had become more than just a mechanic. He had become a strategist, capable of coordinating defenses and organizing groups to protect the city from raiders and opportunists. Each time the city faced a threat, Kale was there, analyzing the enemy, predicting their moves, and finding clever ways to overcome them. The people trusted him without question, though they did not know why he seemed born to lead. Leora, in her distant city of knowledge and libraries, had become a quiet force of intellect. She had turned the school where she grew up into a sanctuary for learning, gathering scholars, children, and inventors alike. Under her guidance, the community developed clever ways to defend themselves, not just with weapons, but through strategy, communication, and intelligence. Leora taught the young ones to read patterns in behavior, predict movements of hostile groups, and share information in ways that enemies could not intercept. Though she was gentle in demeanor, her mind was sharp, and her decisions shaped the survival of her people. She was a leader by influence rather than by decree, and her city began to thrive where others fell to chaos. Sauron, meanwhile, had become the protector of a scattered group of survivors in the harsh wastelands. Years of survival had made him strong, resourceful, and decisive. He had trained his group to defend themselves, improvise in battle, and trust one another completely. Sauron understood the value of courage and teamwork. Even against larger, better-equipped raiders, his small band was able to defend settlements, rescue travelers, and ensure that humanity's spirit survived in places where hope had almost vanished. Sauron carried the weight of responsibility with quiet dignity, unaware that the instincts guiding him were part of the royal legacy he did not yet know. Though separated by worlds, each of the three felt a strange pull, a sense that the galaxy was calling them toward something greater. Kale began to notice patterns in the attacks on his city, realizing that a larger organization of warlords was trying to consolidate power. Leora's scouts reported unusual activity among rogue fleets, and she sensed that a larger threat loomed over the galaxy. Sauron, patrolling the wastelands, noticed increasing coordination among raiders who had previously acted independently. Each child, guided by instinct, intelligence, and training, began to sense that the time for action was approaching. One day, Kale received a mysterious encrypted message from an unknown source. It contained detailed information about a fleet planning to attack his city within days. The message included advice, strategies, and warnings that no ordinary person could have known. Kale studied it carefully, realizing that whoever sent it understood the city's strengths and weaknesses intimately. He shared the information with his trusted team, preparing defenses and planning countermeasures. When the attackers arrived, they were met not by a disorganized city, but by a coordinated, clever force that outsmarted them at every turn. Kale's reputation grew even stronger, and the people began to whisper that he was no ordinary human, that he possessed knowledge and abilities far beyond what should be possible. Leora, too, received subtle clues in her city, reports of unusual signals, coded messages hidden in the stars, patterns in raider movements. She began to connect the dots, using her intellect to predict the actions of hostile factions and coordinate the defense of multiple settlements. She trained young adults to act as scouts and messengers, passing information silently and efficiently. Communities that had seemed isolated suddenly began to work together, guided by Leora's quiet leadership. She realized that ordinary humans, working together with intelligence and courage, could resist even the remnants of a once mighty empire. Sauron's moment came when a large band of raiders attacked a caravan traveling through the wastelands. The caravan carried food, water, and essential supplies for struggling settlements. Sauron acted swiftly, leading his group in a series of traps and ambushes that allowed the convoy to pass safely. He used every lesson learned from years of survival, anticipating every move of the enemy. By the end of the day, the raiders had been repelled, and the caravan had reached its destination. Sauron's leadership inspired loyalty, bravery, and a growing belief in the possibility of a free future. Despite the successes, Selara continued to watch from afar. She monitored their growth, sending subtle guidance, and felt a growing pride in her children. Each was developing the skills, values, and instincts necessary to lead not because of a crown, but because of courage, intelligence, and humanity's innate strength. She began to believe that the time might soon come when they would need to unite, though she did not yet know how she could make it happen without revealing herself. A year passed, and rumors of a growing resistance began to circulate. Humans across the galaxy were beginning to organize, inspired by victories in scattered cities and settlements. Ordinary humans were rising to defend themselves, protect the weak, and challenge warlords who had taken control in the Empire's absence. These acts of bravery and ingenuity reminded Selara of her vision. The true strength of humanity was not in rulers or armies, but in the spirit, courage, and intelligence of its people. Kale received new intelligence that a fleet, larger than any he had faced, was moving toward the trade routes his city relied on. This fleet belonged to remnants of the old empire, determined to regain lost territory and assert dominance. He realized that facing them directly would be dangerous, so he devised a plan using guerrilla tactics, clever diversions, and hidden traps in the asteroid belts near the trade routes. He called on his city's engineers, pilots, and defenders, instructing them to move precisely and act as one. When the fleet arrived, they were met with unexpected resistance. Ships appeared from hidden locations, ambushes struck at key points, and Kale's strategy turned a desperate battle into a remarkable victory. Humans whispered about the young leader who seemed to know the future, who acted with the precision of someone far wiser than his age. Meanwhile, Leora began receiving scouts from nearby settlements seeking guidance. Word of her intelligence, foresight, and leadership had spread. She trained these scouts in observation, strategy, and the value of working together. Using her methods, multiple settlements coordinated to defend against raiders and hostile warlords, sharing knowledge and resources. Her city became a beacon of hope and resilience, showing that even without armies, humans could survive and thrive through intelligence and cooperation. Sauron's challenge grew as raiders and bandits formed alliances to control larger regions of the wastelands. He led patrols, coordinated with settlements, and developed networks of communication to warn travelers and settlers of danger. His strength and quick thinking saved hundreds of lives. Sauron began to understand the importance of larger strategy and realized that protecting one settlement at a time would not be enough. Humanity needed coordinated leadership to survive. His instincts told him that he was being prepared for something greater, though he could not yet name what it was. One evening, Selara sent a hidden message through one of her trusted allies, encoded in a way that only her children could understand. It was a message of encouragement, guidance, and warning. She reminded them that the galaxy was changing, that dangers were rising, and that the strength of humans would be tested in ways they could not yet see. Though they did not know who sent it, the guidance helped them refine their strategies, unite their communities, and prepare for the larger challenges ahead. The children, each in their own world, began to feel a connection to one another, a strange sense of kinship, a shared purpose that went beyond ordinary friendship or duty. They were being drawn toward a future where they might need to act together, combining their skills, knowledge, and courage to confront threats that no single city or settlement could face alone. In the shadows of the galaxy, remnants of the old empire noticed the growing resistance. They were surprised and frustrated that humans, once thought weak and disorganized, were beginning to fight back. Raiders were repelled, warlords lost influence, and settlements began to thrive under the guidance of ordinary humans whose determination and cleverness surpassed expectations. The galaxy was quietly shifting, and the seeds of a new order were being sown. Selara watched all of this from her hidden vantage points, a mixture of pride and anxiety in her heart. Her children had grown into remarkable humans, but the challenges ahead were still vast. The Empire's remnants would not rest, and the galaxy was far from safe. Yet she saw the true essence of humanity shining through: courage, intelligence, loyalty, and an unwavering desire to protect what was right. As the sun set over each of their worlds, Kael, Leora, and Sauron looked at the stars and felt a growing sense of purpose. They did not yet know their true heritage, but they knew that the galaxy needed them. They understood on some instinctive level that their actions, whether repairing a ship, guiding a city, or defending a settlement, mattered far more than they had imagined. Humans, ordinary yet extraordinary, were beginning to shape the future. And somewhere in the distance, unseen yet watching, Princess Selara knew that the time was approaching when her children would need to unite. Together they would represent not just survival, but the true strength of humanity, the courage, ingenuity, and resilience that no empire could destroy. She smiled softly, knowing that though the galaxy remained dangerous, the spirit of humans, guided by her hidden heirs, was ready to rise. The resistance was growing. The children were prepared. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, was beginning to see the first sparks of hope that could ignite a brighter, freer future. The galaxy was changing. Pockets of human settlements had begun to flourish, defying the chaos left by the fall of the Empire. Ordinary humans, once considered weak or insignificant, had become courageous, clever, and united. Kael, Leora, and Sauron had grown into leaders in their respective worlds, each unaware that they were siblings, heirs of a fallen empire, yet each carrying the instinct and wisdom to guide humanity through uncertain times. Kael had turned his city of mechanics and trade into a fortress of ingenuity. His workshops hummed with activity as engineers, pilots, and fighters prepared for a new challenge. Word had come of a large fleet moving through the trade routes, remnants of the old empire seeking to reclaim control. The fleet was far larger than anything Kael had faced before, and ordinary humans alone could not stand against it without clever strategy. Kale called a council of leaders from neighboring settlements. Maps were spread across tables, showing the fleet's movements, supply lines, and vulnerabilities. He devised a plan not based on brute force but on clever tactics: ambushes in asteroid fields, false supply signals to lure the fleet into traps, and modifications to ships that gave smaller vessels the advantage of speed and maneuverability. Kale spoke with confidence, but also with humility, reminding the leaders that their strength lay not in weapons alone, but in their unity and courage. Meanwhile, Leora's city of scholars and strategists had become a hub of intelligence. She had trained messengers, scouts, and spies to gather information on the Empire's remnants. She had created networks of communication across settlements, ensuring that knowledge could flow quickly and securely. When Kale's council sent word of the approaching fleet, Leora was ready. Her advice guided Kale's tactics, ensuring that every move of the human defenders was informed and precise. Though she remained in her city, her influence stretched across the galaxy, a quiet force shaping the outcome of battles yet to come. Sauron, patrolling the wastelands, heard the distant rumble of conflict. Raiders, sensing an opportunity, were trying to seize settlements weakened by the fleet's advance. Sauron gathered his band of defenders, training them not just in combat, but in strategy, coordination, and quick thinking. His group became a moving shield, intercepting threats before they could harm settlements, disrupting supply lines, and guiding refugees to safety. Sauron's leadership inspired loyalty and courage. People trusted him to act wisely, and he did not fail them. The three were still unaware of one another, yet their actions were converging. Kale's trap slowed the fleet, forcing it to scatter. Leora's intelligence allowed settlements to coordinate defenses and supply lines efficiently. Sauron's forces protected vulnerable points in the wastelands, preventing the fleet from gaining reinforcements. The galaxy was responding to them, not because they wore crowns, but because humans, when united by courage and intelligence, could accomplish remarkable things. One night, Kale was reviewing maps and calculations when a strange signal reached him. It was subtle, encoded in a way that immediately caught his attention. Following the trail, he discovered a hidden enclave where Leora had been monitoring fleet movements. He had never met her, yet her instructions were precise, anticipating the fleet's moves. He realized she was extraordinary, guiding humans across the galaxy with clarity and insight. A spark of recognition flickered in his mind, a sense that this person was connected to him in a way he could not yet explain. At the same time, Sauron intercepted messages that indicated settlements had begun coordinating far beyond what he had expected. Strange coincidences, rapid movements, and flawless strategies led him to suspect an unseen hand guiding them. His instincts told him that someone, or something, was orchestrating these actions. He prepared to meet the leaders behind the plans, ready to offer his strength and protection in a combined effort. The fleet, confident in its power, advanced, but it underestimated humanity. Ordinary humans, guided by Kale, Leora, and Sauron, began to push back. Ambushes in asteroid fields disabled massive ships. Supply lines were cut, causing the fleet to struggle. Small, agile craft harassed larger vessels, exploiting every weakness. Humans fought with determination, intelligence, and courage, and their unity began to turn the tide of battle. In a final decisive moment, the three young leaders met. Kale, following a trail of intelligence, arrived at Leora's city, greeted by her cautious yet trusting eyes. Sauron joined them shortly after, having traced the movement of fleets through the wastelands. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a connection deeper than friendship or alliance. Though they did not yet know they were siblings, they instinctively understood that together, they could achieve what none could accomplish alone. They combined their strengths. Kale offered tactical ingenuity and engineering skill. Leora provided intelligence, foresight, and strategy. Soren brought protection, courage, and leadership in combat. Together, they became a force of human resilience and strength, coordinating a galaxy-wide resistance against the remnants of the Empire. Humans, ordinary yet extraordinary, followed their lead, fighting not for crowns or titles, but for survival, freedom, and the future. The battle that followed was fierce. The fleet had numbers, but humans had cleverness, strategy, and unwavering morale. Ambushes, traps, and coordinated attacks dismantled the fleet piece by piece. Settlements previously thought weak defended themselves with ingenuity. Humans who had once been ordinary now acted with extraordinary courage, inspired by the three leaders guiding them. Ships that had seemed fragile became deadly, using speed and clever tactics to exploit weaknesses in the larger vessels. Amidst the chaos, Kale piloted a critical strike team, disabling the command ships of the fleet. Leora coordinated simultaneous defenses across settlements, ensuring no location was vulnerable. Soren led ground forces against invading raiders, protecting civilians and reclaiming lost territory. Every move was precise, every decision calculated, every action guided by intelligence and bravery. The fleet, overwhelmed by the coordination, ingenuity, and courage of humans, began to collapse. As the dust settled, the galaxy was quiet. The remnants of the Empire had been defeated, scattered into small, powerless groups. Settlements were free, and humanity had proven itself not through fear, domination, or brute force, but through intelligence, courage, and unity. Kale, Leora, and Soren stood together for the first time, looking at the stars. They still did not know they were siblings, yet they felt the bond of destiny between them. The humans around them cheered, not for royalty, but for the leaders who had guided them through darkness. Princess Selara, watching from afar, felt a mixture of relief and pride. Her children had succeeded, not by the power of a crown, but by embodying the true spirit of humanity. They had led ordinary humans to achieve extraordinary things, proving that the strength of the people was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Her plan to protect them, to raise them among strangers, had succeeded beyond her hopes. In the days that followed, the three leaders worked to rebuild the galaxy. Kale focused on technology and engineering, helping settlements become self-sufficient. Leora spread knowledge and strategy, ensuring that every human community could defend itself and thrive. Soren continued to protect the weak, guide new leaders, and maintain unity across settlements. Together, they created a new order, not based on empires or rulers, but on the strength, courage, and intelligence of ordinary humans. Eventually, the truth of their heritage began to surface. Clues left by Princess Selara, the pendants, encrypted messages, and subtle guidance revealed to them their connection. They learned that they were siblings, children of a princess who had risked everything to protect them. Yet the revelation was not what defined them. They had already proven that humanity could rise without reliance on royalty. Their lineage was important, yes, but it was their courage, intelligence, and leadership that had shaped the galaxy. In the end, the galaxy entered a new era. Humans were no longer subjects of an empire, but free, resilient, and united. Kale, Leora, and Soren became symbols of what ordinary humans could achieve: courage, ingenuity, and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. They had proven that the human spirit could survive, thrive, and even triumph when the world seemed lost. Princess Selara finally revealed herself to her children, embracing them at last. Tears were shed, but there was no fear, only pride, love, and hope. Her children had surpassed even her expectations, proving that the greatest power in the galaxy was not an empire, a crown, or technology, but the strength of humanity itself. The story of the three hidden heirs spread across the galaxy, inspiring humans everywhere. Communities flourished, knowledge was shared, and bravery became the measure of leadership. The empire's collapse had seemed like the end, but it had become the beginning of a new chapter, one written by ordinary humans who had discovered extraordinary courage. And so the galaxy thrived, guided by three young leaders who had grown among strangers, who had learned the true meaning of strength, and who had proven that humanity, united in courage and intelligence, could achieve greatness beyond imagination. Princess Celara smiled as she watched them, knowing that the legacy of the Empire lived on, not in a throne, but in the hearts of humans who had dared to rise. The stars shone bright over a galaxy reborn, and for the first time in centuries, hope was no longer a fragile thing. It was unstoppable. The princess hid her babies among strangers as the empire crumbled,